Today we're actually going to be doing a reaction of Black or African American Neither, and here's why. Now this video is actually, looks like it was uploaded back in September 2019. So it's kind of an older video. It's coming up on close to a year of it's being out. But I think because due to the climate that's going on, hopefully this is probably something that'll be a little bit more enlightening. Now, it's from a YouTube page named Mexim, which I can't really pronounce the name, so I'm actually just going to throw it up here when we're looking at it. So it's actually going to be right there. So you see a mix, I don't know. But anyways, let's actually get into this and start watching this video, and then we'll see what my thoughts are for the most part.
I don't understand why people are so wedded to the term black. And the justification for it is, well, it's because the European made it negative. It's the Europeans' word. It was negative before it was applied to African people. It's like they're getting it backwards. It isn't that Europeans said, we're going to make this word black negative in order to accommodate our desire to devalue African people or dark complexioned Asian people.
See, like, this is actually a 100% true statement, because if you look at a lot of things in life, like let's take your phone for example, something very minute. Nowadays everybody likes dark mode on their phones, but before that wasn't even an option because they assumed everybody would like light mode or everything else. Just something that minute, which might be reading into it more than it actually needs to be. Probably was a lot more convenient to actually code something around that. But if you look at it, black as a whole in random places are always seemed as negative outside of the market. Like, that's why you have Black Friday. But like, I've heard this before where they've pretty much said, not even related to black people. That's the funniest part. Just the fact that black versus white or any other thing is perceived in a negative way. But anyways, let's keep watching. So far, I like it.
We have become, we meaning people of the African world, whether it's the continent or more especially within the diaspora, so-called black folks, are very reactive rather than proactive, which means that if this individual is calling himself white, we're going to react and call ourselves black because we're the opposite. Not really understanding that we're not.
That's actually a really interesting take on that. Like, I can agree with that. I can not even just in that example. I can 100% agree with that because like there's certain things I've seen, but I really want to see where he's going with this because that was a very interesting example to use. But anyways, let's keep watching.
Not exactly taking a step in the right direction because now, as I like to say, given all the linguistic and cultural baggage of black, you are trying to push an elephant uphill on roller skates. You're trying to turn a negative into a positive when there's a clean, pure stream nearby to draw from. If you're referring to complexion, in fact, there's a famous scene in the movie Cry Freedom about the life of Steve Biko. The presumption is that this event actually occurred. If it didn't, it still made sense in terms of the screenwriters and Richard Attenborough putting it into the film. And that is, Steve Biko is in court. He's charged with basically, being seen as a threat to the apartheid system, and he was banned. So he's in court talking to the European judge, the Boer British judge, and the judge says to him,
"Why call yourselves black? I mean, you people are more brown than black."
"Why do you call yourselves white? You people are more pink than white."
"Precisely."
But there's no deeper unpacking of what just occurred. And it raises an important question about systems of oppression. But why the need to fixate on black? There's the work of a Harvard.
See, like, that's one of the things I don't understand. Like, I don't think it's black versus white. And that's what I think is one of the weirdest things to me, especially if I'm not originally from this country. So, like, the whole black versus white thing, like, why is that even an argument? Like, when you put the term black versus white, that means there needs to be a victor in some way or some fashion. But it's not a situation where somebody needs to win. Like, that's what I don't understand, the whole black versus white scenario. Because, like, okay, so there needs to be a winner. So no matter what, we're making this into a you versus me instead of whatever else it needs to be. It's just off the bat conflict. And it's being just portrayed as conflict. Like, I don't understand the whole premise of black versus white, especially considering, like, a lot of people are mixed. Myself, I'm mixed. And a lot of us might have some white in us. So it doesn't logically make sense where it's a black versus white type deal. Like, there should not be versus. Maybe it's like black compared to like white or something. But, like, I don't like versus being used. And I see it all over the place. And I'm like, why are we making it into something where it has to be perceived as a conflict? But who knows? Maybe he's going to explain it later on. I don't know. I'll just pause and say my thoughts. My thoughts.
Psychologist who I believe is of East Indian ancestry. Her name is Dr. Benaji. She recognizes what are often called mind bug, or she coined the term mind bugs, which are culturally imposed perceptions of reality. And the dominant perception of reality for those of us who speak the English language is when you say black or use black, its dominant use is negative. Black.
That's actually what I was talking about earlier. Not maybe he's going to talk about black people as a whole, but generally, I've heard this before. Even before this word mind bug, whatever the hell. I've heard this before where black in some cases is used negative. Nowadays, not as much because it's like you have things like Black Friday that's been pretty much super popular. But in some cases, yeah, I've heard this. But anyways.
Black magic, black night, black death, right? And to try to overcome that is
so I'm gonna pause. I don't think that was a good example. The package says black magic and black night. First of all, black magic, which is just sorcery, is being used in at least this is a year later. So I'm in the future. Tons of shows on Netflix use like black magic currently, tons of them. And the fact that during this time, the Dark Knight was a thing. But I guess it's Dark Knight, not Black Knight. But I don't know. I'll keep watching.
Very difficult. Now, this is a Harvard faculty member, psychologist, prominent psychologist who's pointing this out. And she calls them the mind bugs. Now, part of what people can do, you could say, well, you need to get people to stop thinking of black as something negative. Okay, that's all right. But in the context of, do you want to fight that battle? Or more importantly, should you be fighting that battle? Because you're still reducing yourself again to your pigment. And you're not looking at yourself in the context of a larger history. And if you want to, like I said, if you want to speak of we as...
See, and not even that, though. Like, that's thinking about it in a macro sense. Yeah, you can... He's right. Yeah, you're reducing yourself to a pigment. And the fact that, as I said earlier, like, a lot of us are mixed. A lot of people from a lot of places, especially here in America, are mixed. So reducing yourself to one pigment, yes, it is... ignoring everything else around you. And even if you don't want to go macro with the whole thing, if you go a lot more micro, that's removing yourself as a individual. So it's like, well, I'm a black guy, you're a black guy, we're black, that's it. So people might get mad about people saying, well, you can't call this black guy and they all look the same. But yeah, if you reduce yourself to just a pure pigment and that's it, on a micro scale, that's removing your individuality as a person. And on a macro scale, like you're saying, it's kind of ignoring or forgetting what's around you. I'm paraphrasing what he's saying. You just heard him. You can just rewind. Anyways, keep watching.
as highly melanated people, or we as in UC, or we as I would say, people of predominant African ancestry, that makes more sense to me. I'm just saying. I just got into the psychology of it, right? That's why people, confuse. I've often thought of this. You have a child reading about the Black Knight and the Black Death and the Black Plague, and then the child goes, "Oh, and I'm a black child." What Benaj?
That's actually a really good point. I mean, it's very, very subconscious level. Now this guy is a psychologist, so I don't know. I'm not a psychologist, so I can't say what like psychological ramifications of something like that. But I mean, it's a point. I think it's a point, disassociation wise, because I mean, those books they could be reading could be positive books. We have no idea. So it's more of a, you can associate that word with whatever it is. But going back to his main thing where it's perceived negatively. So I can only assume, if we're assuming those books maybe are negative, but if they're positive books, that argument's kind of So it's kind of on both sides, because he's assuming, and that's the thing, like he's assuming himself that these books that are being read in a negative connotation. And because they're being read in a negative connotation, because it's a Black Plague, Black Knight, and everything else, this kid might be associating, hey, I'm black too. So if these black things are black, I'm black. I'm black because I'm black. I'm bad. The way it came off is he's assuming negativeness, which is kind of funny considering that's what he's talking about, is black being perceived negatively. So maybe that's the whole point of it, is to show that. But that I'm leaving. Let's keep going.
And what some of this psychology is now suggesting is it may not be a sense of overt racism, but rather the culturally imposed racism, what people used to call national character, how nations see themselves as a result of their particular histories and experiences. So, like I said, Drew Ali, just in terms of saying you're not Negro, black, and colored, was getting people out from under that weight of the negativity associated with blackness. And for people who say, well, it's better, the same person would not allow you to call him a Negro. But with all due respect, Negro is the same thing as black. If I'm speaking Spanish, it's Negro. I'm going to call you Negro.
Yes, it makes no sense. Like, Spanish people say it. And I think this leads back to the whole black versus white thing. Like, if somebody says that up here, people will get mad. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand. I mean, then again, like, I've never heard a Spanish people say it around me. Like, if they're talking about colors and everything else, blah, blah, blah. But, like, nobody's ever directly called me that. But I think that's more for sign of respect. Just calling you, hey, black. Even if it's like, hey, white person. Like, I know black people that say that shit, like, to random people. And I'm like, bro, that's disrespectful. Like, you wouldn't want to hear that coming at you, so don't send it to other people. That's mad disrespectful. So it's like, that's what I don't get. Is like, one person can say it, but the other one, nah. It's weird. It's weird. But anyways, I'm keep watching.
Negro, right? So it doesn't make any sense.
Hey, he said it doesn't make any sense either. Yeah. Oh, my volume got muted.
English sources all affirm that the term Moor was used for people of African ancestry. Later, the term blackamoor is introduced, but it's part of the development of the kind of pigmentocracy direction that exists within the English language.
So I've actually heard that before, the whole Moor thing. Like once, actually, literally just once. And this was maybe like 2-3 years ago, from this guy that traced his ancestry all the way back to like Africa. And he says, yeah, we're more people and you're a Moor person, which literally if it was actually changed to that, it would completely decimate a lot of arguments. Like the whole black versus white is black versus more. That makes no sense. More, we know we're associated with a certain type of people, and it has nothing to do with color. It has to do with a type of people. I mean, because at the end of the day, like, there's dark-skinned Spanish people. There's, technically, I mean, dark-skinned white people. There's, like, tan people. Like, have you seen Italian people? There's some dark-skinned Italian people. So, I can kind of see that. But anyways, I'm going to keep watching. We got, like, what, 6 minutes left? Let me keep watching this.
Just as in other languages, there are different ways to translate something more accurately. So, and one of the examples I've often used is the difference in Spanish if you're speaking of knowing someone versus knowing something. You don't use the same verb. Conocer and saber is not the same thing, right? One means to know a person, one means to know about something. By the same token, if you translate more to simply mean black, knowing that black in the English language is affiliated with so much negativity, long before it was ever referenced for people of African, or I dare say Indian ancestry, because a lot of people seem to be under the impression that black was only used to refer to people of Africa.
Yes. I mean, I just said it just a second ago. But yes, that's what I'm talking about. Like, it's really funny I just said this. Like, there's let's use black anyways. There's black Spanish people. Same thing with Indian people. Like, my dad's Indian. So it's just like, they're technically black Indian people. It's a quote unquote like shade. So, that's what I don't understand. It's so weird. But I mean, it's got me keep watching.
And that's, you don't want to be encapsulated simply in a color, because now the emphasis is simply on your color and not on your culture. So they said,
yes, 100% can agree on that. Same thing. Like, he's talking about in a macro sense. It takes away from things that make you who you are, because it is such a big paintbrush across everything. Like, your culture has a lot more effect on who you are than your color. You're literally your parents, everything else around you, your grandparents, everything has more effect on who you are than your color. So I like emphasizing something that has nothing. I mean, it does, but has at its core a minute effect on who you are as a person. Doesn't make sense. So I can understand this argument 100%, because yes, your culture makes a vast difference. As I said, I'm from a different country. Like, our culture is different from up here in America. They coincide very well, and a lot of things overlap as a whole, but there's still like very minute things. Like some of the stuff I talk about here, which doesn't make any sense to me. Cause like but this, I think, yes, it is going from one collective to another collective, but culture is a lot smaller. I mean, it is still big because it's still macro, because your culture can be for like hundreds of thousands of people, depending on where you live. It could be for 50 people, depending on where you are, because like a culture of a neighborhood, if we're talking about that, or a culture of a country. If you're talking about a culture of a country, that's more macro. Or the culture of your home, that's micro. So those different levels mean much more than your actual color of your skin. And to emphasize like your color over your culture makes no sense, because if you were never taught anything, and if you completely take away your culture as a whole, which is what you are your culture. Like, there's a big saying from like Jim Roth, if I said right, is like, you are like the medium of like the 5 people that are around you. That's your culture. That's why it's always good to surround yourself with people that are doing better in life, because you're going to learn from them innately. And you're going to learn, and that's building up. That's whatever they bring in, you're going to build from that. That's pretty much along the same line. But if you completely ignore that and say, you know what, I am this, that's accepting that thing, in all honesty, like my perspective, that nothing can change. Like, you're just that. Boom. I'm a doorknob. Okay? I mean, that was actually a bad example. Anyways, back to the show.
Well, black people are the only group in the United States that is designated racially as opposed to geographically, right? Or nationally. And this is part of the problem, right? You have, and that's why I've said to people all the time, why don't we speak of yellow Americans, right? If we're going to use the color nomenclature, use it across the board. Just use it all the time. But if someone will say, well, I'm Irish, I'm German, I'm black, and they're running through their lineage, and I'm going, all right, Germans come from Germany.
Exactly. Like, and I'm pretty sure what he's doing right now is, I mean, he hasn't mentioned African American yet, which is kind of considering the title. So, like, I think this is why it makes go with African American, or just say African, like, but like me, yeah, I can say I'm a black guy, but I use it as just a random encompassing term just to make my life easier. So same thing, I can say I'm from Jamaica, I'm half Indian. Like I say, I can have some white in me. Like it's kind of the same thing with white people, and black people. You can say those things. You can say I'm a white person, I'm a black person. Yeah, he said you don't say you're a yellow person. You don't say you're a pink person. You don't say you're a purple person. Same thing with like Asian or Spanish people. You don't say like anything. I mean, considering census, I think consider Spanish people as part of like the white people section. They don't refer to themselves as that. Maybe some do. I have no idea. I'm not Spanish. I mean, I have Portuguese in me a little bit, but like same thing. Like, see how it is described it. So I can see that because it means nothing. As you said, is a thing. So it's like, okay, you're a black person. What does that mean? Like, where does that come from? And I think a lot of people, as he was saying earlier, they associate it with maybe Africa or something like that. But it's like, as I said, there's Indian people that could be perceived as black. I said, I'm half Indian. There's like Italian people. There's tons of different people from other countries that somebody sees them like, oh yeah, you're black. Oh yeah, you're African American. And like, that doesn't mean anything. You have no idea where they're from. So there's an assumption. Now, I don't think there's very much, and when I get questions like those, I don't think there's malice in any of those questions. Not even like the slight bit of malice, at least for my personal take. Because every time I've ever gotten questioned like those, it's normally, in all honesty, because of my accent. Because there's sometimes I mispronounce words, or I might say them in a very weird way. And they're like, hey, Marlon, where are you from? I'm like, yeah, I'm from here, here, and here. And then I'll tell them some stuff in here. So I've never like received questions about where I'm from in like a malice, like in a way of malice, which is, I hear people say it happens to them, but I've never received it. I've never seen it. So I can't really talk on this subject as much. But anyways, we got like 2 minutes. Let me finish watching this.
The Irish come from Ireland. Black, what is that? At least, well, I don't, because we don't know where we're from. You can at least say Africa.
He said the same thing. Well, pretty much. I mean, I said it a little bit different, but yeah, he's right. You can at least say Africa.
At least say Africa, right? At least say African. I know I have some African ancestry. And now, in this day and age, you can even do an Ancestry.com test. And they can tell you, right, what part of Africa, what ethnic group or nation or so-called tribe one is from, right? So the value of not identifying with black is it compels you to be more specific in identifying culture, knowing your geographic origin, knowing your history.
I think that was a good video. I mean, considering it's a year old, like almost everything he says still pretty much hits. Now, I wish he kind of did hit more on the whole African American thing because, like, yeah, he's right. I mean, you could at least say that. But like, even the term African American, that is a nationality, and it doesn't really make sense to me why people refer to as African American, because it isn't a race. It isn't. Like, because there's white people in Africa. There's Asian people in Africa. I think a lot of, I can't remember. Just double check me if you want to. I'm just posting the description if I'm wrong. Not to say description, in the comments if I'm wrong. But I think China currently is like buying a bunch of land over in Africa. So it's like there's gonna be like Asian people, like Oriental Asian people, even though they might not like the Hermos, whatever. They're gonna be there. So it's like if they come to America, are they be labeled as African Americans? Probably not. So it's like a nationality being associated with a race, which is kind of weird because you don't see somebody refer to somebody as a European American. I mean, you've heard it, but you don't hear, like you said, hey, that's an Irish American person. That's an Italian American person. That is a Turkish American person. It just is weird. You just say they're American. So like, I think it creates like a subsection. Like if you say you're going car shopping, you're like, okay, I'm going car shopping. And then you say, I'm going to buy an automobile. Or actually, that was a really bad example. I can't even think of an example because it doesn't make sense. It's like, it's a nationality being used as a race. Because I understand white people being used, even Spanish. Like, if you just completely remove white for a second, because that's the whole white versus black thing. Let's just remove that for a second. Like, let's use Spanish people. Like, if you say you're a Spanish person, that's going to go in the top of your head. They may come from one of this, like, maybe they come from Puerto Rico. Maybe they come from, like, South America. Maybe they come from, and there's not all Spanish people from there. But that's a very wide encompassing statement. But it doesn't mean a specific place, and it doesn't mean a specific race, kind of. I mean, it kind of does. It kind of does. But, like, nobody goes and say, hey, I'm a Spanish American person all the time. You just say they're Spanish. That's it. Or just say they're American. That's it. They can be used separately. Like, and it's one of the things I don't understand here is where I see a lot of people say, hey, yo, I'm African American. And they call me African American. And I'm like, my boy, I'm from Jamaica. I mean, yeah, like doing my citizenship, I'm gonna be just an American. Like after you do your citizenship, you're just an American. I'll be like, I'm a Jamaican kid that came from Jamaica, and now I'm American. Like nobody calls me a Jamaican American. I don't think I've ever heard that. If you've heard like Jamaican American or Trinidadian American or what else, St. Lucian American. Post it in the description below. I keep saying description. Post it in the comment below. I would love to hear that. But anyways, that's it for the video. I'm going to post a link in the description, the actual proper place I said today, to the actual complete video. Sorry if I'm jumping around a lot in here, but like, I think this is something that's really cool to watch. And he makes some valid points. But besides that, I'll see you guys for the next video. If you do have a video you'd like me to actually watch, or some submissions, I mean, you can check my Patreon out, of course. But post those in the comments for something you think I actually be interested in watching. But besides that, I'll see you later.